Hello, patrons. I hope you're doing well. And first of all, I would like to thank you for continuing to support this project. For all of you that have recently joined, it's been a bit more difficult for me to record videos more often because we are also again in like semi-lockdown here in Belgium. Actually, in the books, looking at the numbers, Belgium is the worst country in the world. Of course, we are very strict with testing and so on, but still, it's not good here. So again, I have my little child at home. They have lengthened the school vacations so that we all stay home, and it's difficult to do anything. So today I have a little bit of time, and I wanted to record a video for you. I've been thinking about this for a while. It's something I mentioned. My memory is terrible. I'm not sure if it was in the comments or maybe I mentioned it in one of the videos, and then I remember having conversation with one of you about this, and she tried it. It was Kenny. Thank you for trying it also, and she also kind of found it interesting. So I wanted to record a video, show it to you actually in detail. It is something that occurred to me, but I don't want to claim that I invented this. So there is this concept in the knitting world which they call an invention. Humans are resourceful and smart, and it's very difficult that something you think you just came up with, nobody has come up with before. So I'm sure someone somewhere has already done this at some point. It just stands to reason. So I'm not gonna say I invented it. It's just a little thing that occurred to me, and I haven't heard of it on the internet on any book. So hey, here it is. Maybe it's useful for you. And yeah, maybe I'm also going to talk a bit about mesh size. So yeah, the trick actually is to, when you're washing an enamel, you see that you put it in the water and it sinks slowly. The larger particles sink first. So you can actually see like a stratification. You see the larger grains on the bottom, and then they get smaller and smaller. The smaller ones, obviously, they weigh less. So they stay up suspended for longer and they sink slowly. And I was just washing a bunch of glasses, and I thought, actually, this is a good way to separate the mesh without having to go through all the trouble with all those stackable things. If you have a system like that, you can separate the mesh. I really don't do it often. I will talk about that a little bit more. But I actually often want a finer enamel. I will say more about that. So I thought, what if I just wait for a moment and pour this enamel, all of this floating stuff, onto another glass and wash them separately. This way I'm separating more or less by mesh into more coarse and more fine grains without all the trouble and the dust and everything, because I really don't like sifting. Sifting with these things is also messy, and then you have to decide which ones to use. If you use them all, you have a lot of different mesh grades, or maybe you use 200 or so as separation, and sometimes you really don't need this precision. So I tried that and it worked very well. So I washed Shower 64, which is a color I use a lot, and I use it for different things. So I use it as a base, and in that case I don't care which grain size there is. I put it direct on copper. It goes almost opaque. It looks like porcelain, and I don't care if it's fine or coarse. But then I also use it as an opalescent gradation or so, as an opalescent gradation, or for opalescent grisaille for details, because it's quite opaque. And then I want fine enamel. But is it necessary to separate by mesh? Normally for opalescent grisaille I would either separate by mesh or grind it very well. But actually, depending on the brand, some brands already come at a quite fine grain. So for example, the Shower 64 is manufactured by Milton Bridge in England, and they actually grind their colors quite a lot, which I love, because mostly I prefer finer rather than coarse. I don't have a lot of use for coarse. So it's already quite fine, the whole enamel, but there are still some grains. It's officially 80 mesh. So I tried that, and there was quite a lot of fine, because yeah, this 64 is quite fine. And now I have two little boxes. I use the one for coarse grain for bases, and I just didn't have to grind, I didn't have to mesh separate. I find it super useful. So I'm gonna continue to do this, especially with opalescents, but sometimes you need a color for a gradation or so, but you don't need it to be ultra fine, you don't need to be grinding, then this works. So it's just a quick trick, maybe you can find it useful. And yeah, I already mentioned that mostly I work, if I need any kind of mesh, I need a finer mesh. I don't have a use for coarse grains in anything, basically. I hear like cloisonné experts saying that they prefer coarse grains because of more clarity. I don't quite understand why that would be the case. Once the finest of the fine, the almost impalpable, finer than flour particles can't clot your enamel, but if you wash with water, those are gonna go away. And I've used up to 325 mesh with clarity, so I'm not a cloisonné specialist. I do some of it, but I am a bit of a plicature specialist, and clarity is super important in plicature. And I also know that there is like a school of thought that you should use a coarse mesh for plicature, and that seems to make some sort of intuitive sense. But in practice, this is not my experience. When you have very large grains, just imagine that you fill a jar with rocks, and then you put boulders, pebbles, little grit, and in the end sand. You are gonna fill all the gaps in this bottle, especially if you add water, which is what we do when we wet pack. So if you only use large stones, you're gonna have lots of air pockets, and this ends up manifesting as little air bubbles. Simply they cannot escape because of all the tension, microscopic little gaps in there. And I see that you either get bubbles from this or like a texture where the large, imagine this magnified, sorry, I shouldn't have moved this. Imagine that you magnify, and what you are seeing here is like large rocks. And even if you pack it, you push and you pack it well, the seams between the grains, when they melt with each other, they don't quite melt. They don't reach a temperature in which it becomes liquid, then it will drip off. And that seam will always be there. So you see a texture. You see like a scar where the grains touched each other. If you use smaller and smaller grains, this texture becomes finer and finer. And yeah, if you look under a microscope, maybe you see that it's less clear, but it's more even. So with plicature, I grind my enamel. So I will say no more for now because I want to make a proper class on plicature, and that's gonna take me a while because I want to do it really well. I want to share that with you, but at another time. So just leaving that there. It doesn't have to be done with coarse grains, and that makes me wonder about the cloisonné, because cloisonné is the same than cloisonné is the same than plicature without the backing. Basically, you have some wire or larger cell, doesn't matter, it's a cell. And you want clarity so that the light goes through to the background. Not necessarily, it could be opaque, but if it's transparent and you have silver backing, you want the most transparency possible. So I can't say because I'm not a specialist, but I would like to investigate more in this direction. This is very easy. This is an empirical question. We can test it and see what happens. See if it really affects the transparency, or if we see scars, or actually if maybe the scars refract the light that is going through the metal and bouncing back, and it may actually be beautiful. So it's up there in the air for me. It's not decided. So now I'm gonna move on to showing you how I do this. It's super simple, but seeing it, it's cool to see how the grains sink and so on. So let's get a bit closer and let's do that. Okay, so the enamel I'm gonna wash is an opalescent. This one is Topaz opalescent from Melton Bridge. And it looks like this. I'm I've been using it lately and I love it. I also have some pieces around here. Yeah, these pieces actually were featured in my last video here on Patreon. So all of these, I have these tubas opalescent and I'm enjoying it a lot. So I'm gonna wash it with this method and see how much we get in each of the glasses. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put like a teaspoon or so. Okay, so first I'm gonna swish it around so that all the grains are well suspended there in the water. And then I let it rest for a moment. I'm not gonna begin washing. See, I already see that the enamel has begun to settle. Actually, I'm gonna do this twice so that you can see it better. So can you see the strata there? You can almost see the lines like on a rock face sometimes, how it's been depositing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna swirl this up again because I actually want part of this on my other glass. So hopefully I don't spill any of the water. I'm gonna try to swish. All of it up. And I think I'm already gonna pour here. Of course, this is not an exact science, and I can just repeat this again. So if I see that I don't have enough there, I can pour it back. So those look quite large. We can see here how they've been. Actually, it looks like they're coarser than finer and then coarser again, maybe because I've been swishing twice. That's not ideal, but if you just do it once. And you see there I have some little like pebbles. That's really bad for enameling, so I'm actually gonna break them up. So I'm gonna swish this and put it in my mortar. And I want all of those little, I don't know, pebbles. I want to break them up. Those are just like agglomerates, so they break up really easily. They are not really stones. So just a little pour around in the mortar. And they're gone. Now I have to pour this back in the glass. I find that a bit more challenging because it has such a wide mouth. Okay, so when it comes to transferring the enamel, I like to use these bowls that have a lip so that I don't pour it all over the place. I use a squirt bottle and then I can just pour it back easily. Because yeah, these glasses have a narrow opening. Alright, and now this, I'm gonna swish it again, and maybe I'm gonna pour a little bit more back into that glass. Alright, another thing I have to mention is that the finer the enamel is, the longer time it takes to settle. So if you're washing very fine enamel because you separated it like this, or you separated it with a mesh system, or you ground it, you have to be really careful that you don't throw away all your hard work or all the nice fine enamel that you want to use. So you will have to wait a lot longer for this enamel to settle than for this one. This one, as you can see, it already starts to look a lot more clear. So it's been a while now, so I think I can pour it. I'm gonna put it in a container. So what I have there is very fine. Normally fine enamel also looks lighter, and I see a little pebble there, which I don't like, so I'm also gonna have to grind this one. You definitely don't need an agate mortar. The agate is a pretty hard stone and it's a bit pricey. There are also harder mortars, but as long as the mortar is harder than the enamel you're set, a porcelain mortar in theory should be harder than enamel, but there is porcelain and porcelain, so some will be harder than others. Unglazed, otherwise you're grinding the glaze into the enamel, which probably not the end of the world. It's a similar product, but it's better to not contaminate it. So an unglazed hard mortar, porcelain mortar, if you buy it at a laboratory supply, it should be hard. And the agate is just much faster, so if you really have to grind a lot, it's better. But for this purpose of simply breaking it up, it's good enough. Okay, so there it goes. This is definitely not a lot, so I think I'm gonna pour a little bit more from this glass. Now that it has settled, I'm just gonna swish. Normally I would do this just in one time probably, but since we found those crumbles there, and I'm already gonna pour it. So this looks quite coarse, like an 18 mesh. I think I'm gonna leave it at that. Again, as I said before, this will depend on how finely ground the enamel is. You will find that you have more or less fine or coarse, so that will depend. And maybe with some brands or enamels you're gonna have almost no fines, and you're gonna have to grind it yourself. So this one, as I mentioned, it's very important to let it settle enough. So that will be taking a lot longer than this one, and I'm gonna have to wash it for a longer time because I'm gonna have to wait between washes a lot more. Alright, so it's just been a moment, and since I've already separated all the fine particles from the coarse, you can see the huge difference it makes in how fast this settles. This is nearly clear. Probably another wash or so, and then I can go on to distilled water. And here, of course, I'm gonna have to be a lot more careful and patient. You can see how it settles so much faster. I think that's gonna be it for the coarse grains. They drop super fast. And I'm just gonna rinse with distilled water. I have my distilled water up here. And yeah, that's clean basically. distilled water. I like to rinse 3 times to remove mineral deposits or so. Depends on your water, but I have extremely hard water here. I don't want any contaminants in there, so I use distilled water. Actually, I think it's demineralized water, whatever they sell for the ironing, the pressing iron. That's fine for me. Settled again. And I keep on waiting for the fine particles. They really take a long time to settle, and I don't want to throw them away. That's always the case, doesn't matter if you ground sifted, separated them like this, you always have to wait for them to settle. And I have a couple of boxes here I prepared. There is many ways you can go about labeling this. I decided to call it fine wash and coarse wash, just so I know that I separated them this way and which is which. So I'm gonna put the coarse here. That's so much water. It's easy to do this because it settles immediately. So I can go back and forth until I have all the grains. So that's my coarse grains. And we are gonna do some sort of time lapse here because this is gonna take a while. You can see that it's clear up to here and not here. That means this can still settle. So I'm gonna wait. Okay, so I waited with a bit more patience, and as you can see, it has settled. So when you see like a level somewhere that it's still dropping, you just give it a bit of time, have patience, and it will completely clear. It's not completely clear yet, so I still have to wash it, but there is like a cloudiness all over it. But when you see a line, it means it's still dropping. So let's get rid of that. And now I want to really swish it well, because those are very tiny particles. And now let's wait here for another good while. Okay, so I hope you can see what I mean. You can maybe see it better in front of my sleeve here. You can see that there's a line here. I need to wait for this to drop. Now I let this one settle again, and it's clear. So we are gonna move on to the distilled water. After 3 washes of distilled water, it's clear, it's sunk. So I'm gonna transfer it to the little boxes I use. I just recently had a Zoe telling me about some Petri dishes that she found. So a Petri dish, do I have any to here to show you? So this is a Petri dish, they're used in laboratory, and this was actually a set of 2, so it was a lid and the container, but I misplaced the other side. Anyway, these are still to be found, they are relatively cheap, and they are a great substitute for these boxes. I have not found, they don't make these anymore, and I have not found a substitute, but I think I'm gonna be switching to these because this is even better. It's glass, which I like a lot, and they close, but they are not airtight. Like, these boxes are not airtight, which I find important so that the enamel doesn't stay wet for a long time, which that damages it. So from now on, I'm gonna be looking for covered Petri dishes, so that's another good tip from Zoe. And okay, let's just move this onto the box. I have to get rid of a little bit of water, otherwise it won't fit. And then swish. And transfer. So as I did here, I got rid of most of the water because I don't like to leave them in a lot of water unless I'm gonna use them right away. And here it's easier because it settles very fast, but here I'm gonna have to be careful, otherwise I'm gonna throw the enamel away. I have to wait for it to settle. Okay, so you can already see a huge difference here. Even the color looks very different. It's the same enamel, but it's just the refraction effect. It's always much lighter when it's fine. And let me try to show you a little bit of detail here. So that's how fine it is. It's like flour. And the coarse grains, you can see that that's more like regular 80 mesh. So that was a very quick, easy way to separate this mesh, no fuss. Well, it wasn't so quick because the small grains have to settle, but if you're washing like say 8 glasses at the same time, you just wait for the others to settle. And that's how I like to do it. I don't like to wash only one color. Alright, so I hope this tip was useful for you. Maybe you can try it and let me know. So again, thanks to all my patrons. I'm gonna be recording a video about making a ring, setting an enamel into a ring next. Maybe you're not a patron yet, but you can see if this is the kind of content that you would like to see. We now have, I think, 41 videos that you can watch. So if you join for $3 a month, you can just watch all of those videos, and I keep on producing 1 or 2 videos a month. Sometimes I make videos about questions I receive from my patrons. I try to answer all questions, so if you want to join us, I will be happy to see you there. Bye bye.